members of the media here. Again, furtherance to the statements made by Oya, and this really basically is a continuation of the budget presentation I made to some of you folks just the other day. But again, it's important to areas that we believe there has to be an intense focus on. It's been the policy of our administration to look at what can be done to invest into what we consider our top priority when it comes to healthcare, and that's the only civilian hospital owned by the people of Guam. A hospital whose role is to accept everyone and anyone, whether they can pay or not. I focused on the last budget discussion, when we had the earlier press conference, focusing on $11.6 million that we intend to invest into critical areas. I've had discussions with management of the hospital and members critical to calculations of what are priorities. With the $11.6 million, there's really two critical areas that we're going to focus on. Number one, it'll be, again, the repair work of our roofing systems. Anyone who's been to the hospital has seen some of the issues in regards to water leakage going on into the premises. I've seen too many times blankets in different parts of the hospital. Those blankets weren't used for patients, but they were used for trying to dry up wet spots as a result of leakage. And of course, there are the issues of water retention inside a hospital. I mean, when I think about the issues on mold, that will be one of the major investments of this $11.6 million. The other major investment will be in our electrical system. Talking with management, this is what was so critical. With our electrical systems, which are so outdated, and with that also some of the major boxes being near water catchment areas, you see why the necessity to move quickly on this. Water and electricity do not go very well together. And so these are really the two top priorities set forth by hospital management and presented to us. And this is where we're looking towards this investment. Thought it was important for us to explain to you why this is so important, why we're focused on it, and why we're going to get much more aggressive in what we believe is money that's been taken from us from the courts, the federal court, and we believe in areas that, number one, break the provisions of a bond contract, most recently, breaking of local law, or the authorization of the breaking of local law, which we also see clearly is also a breach of the consent decree. I must remind you folks that we have now, if it pans out, we're going to have about $110 million accumulated deficit as of this fiscal year. And that is as a result of the $10 million surplus we're projecting, and you're netting what the accumulated deficit of $119 million. Just on the areas ordered by the courts, contrary to the bond contracts, where we have not been reimbursed, you're looking between $40 and $45 million. So you have a order by the federal judge, by the federal court, that contravenes a bond contract. One of the statements made by the federal judge in the most recent order is in discussions and working with the receiver and working with the government partners, that there would be no detrimental impact to the financial condition of the government. Well, it has been. It's been nearly 50% of the accumulated deficit of the government of Guam. The next most egregious act was then the ordering or the authorizing of the receiver to break a local law in contravention of a ruling of the public auditor and in contravention with a ruling by our local superior court. It is very clear, as stipulated in the consent decree, that the government must follow the law. It's not a recommendation. It's not, oh gosh, I think you should do this. It is incumbent for those parties involved in this consent decree to follow the law, both local or federal. The only time there would be some contravention or some order to break local law if it was in conflict with federal law, in conflict with the Constitution. Unfortunately, that has not occurred. And with that, we believe it is so important, especially when an investment is so important to the health and safety of the people of Guam, that we must do all measures to contain this judicial activism by a federal court that is basically ordering folks to break contracts, break laws, and break the consent decree. I've tasked our fiscal team and of our administration to see what we can do in administrative remedies in regards to using this 11.6 million in order to fund the hospital renovations and improvements. I'm also going to look towards, if necessary, working with our Attorney General to see what she can do. Obviously, I would believe that the Attorney General has issues of an order by one judge to break the laws of Guam. And I'm hopeful that the Attorney General can work collaboratively with us, if necessary, to go exercise legal remedies in ensuring that the people of Guam receive the money that is due to them, and that the courts, at the same time, will follow the precepts of a consent decree and follow the law. This judicial activism, and I think it's important, especially as you look at what's happening with the Supreme Court, very clear, even with the federal government and with the incoming Trump administration, judges are there not to make the law. They're there to interpret the law and to enforce that interpretation. Unfortunately, we see now where certain judges are taking the place of a legislature in creating law, and or they are taking the place of an executive branch, a governor, and exercising operational authority on areas that they should have no concern. So with that, it was important for you folks to be here, to look at the reasons for why we want to move forward in aggressively taking money that is rightfully the people's of Guam and focus it on what we believe is important, and that is fortifying our hospital. And with that, that's my comment, and I look forward to your questions for any more details. And I have also members of our team here that can answer any more detailed questions if I don't have the answers. Thank you.
So Governor, I think you're referencing the Guam Solid Waste Authority and the monies
Exactly.
that are being set aside for, I think
Yeah.
it's supposed to be Section 31,
Yeah.
that they're taking that money and they're setting that aside for what they say is future.
It was very clear in the supplemental indenture that there was certain listing of what the monies would go to. Of course, it's paying the bond number. And then, of course, it's funding operational requirements. And then it was reimbursing the general fund for that Section 30 monies that were used. The court decided to flip it, and with additional capital requirements, non-consent decree requirements, also relating to areas where authorization for additional expenditures, they did not follow the precepts as dictated by the bond contract. And I want to add to that, that was the first sin. Secondly, most recently, I've talked to some attorneys, they have never seen any situation where a judge has authorized an entity to break the law. And I'm talking about procurement law. With that, and of course we have the consent decree, it's very clear in the consent decree when a judge orders for a breach of a contract, when a judge orders for the breaking of local law, then it is in conflict with the consent decree. This cannot continue. much of what has occurred has resulted in a financial hardship and burden to the point of being nearly 50% of the accumulated deficit of the government of Guam. And we also believe, if you were to take the words of her order, that she's even conflicted in the statements that she's made, because indeed there has been a heavy burden and again a detrimental impact to the government of Guam, particularly to providing what we have to do to provide critical services such as for the necessary resources for a hospital.
So you're saying that the reimbursement to the general fund is what the court is not allowing?
Yes.
The receiver's keeping,
And that is
that's $11
accumulated-
million?
No, this upcoming budget is about, what they've been holding back on an annual basis, about 11.6 million. What we're looking at now accumulated, where we believe that she has gone over her authority, is an accumulated of anywhere between 40 and $45 million. And they can give you more details just based on what sheet or what report you're looking at. And again, I go back to, we have an accumulated deficit of about $110 million. And then when you take a look at budget laws that have been enacted, monies that have been appropriated over several budget cycles, monies that would have gone to a hospital, that would have gone to Medicaid, that would have gone to police officers or fire trucks, that the federal court has decided that they would prioritize on areas that weren't even part of the consent decree.
Can you break down what the 45 million is?
Well, basically, over the years, they're supposed to be giving us 11.9 million annually. And so in 2014, it was ordered that they didn't have to reimburse the general fund for these payments. So it's an accumulation over the years of the non-payment or the short payments to the general fund for reimbursement.
I'm hoping that whoever was a party to that case appeals it. I can't see any higher court, whether it's a court of appeals or a Supreme Court, that would allow for a federal judge to authorize someone to break the law
That's the equipment
with
procurement.
the equipment procurement.
So what is the legal recourse at this point? I know this has been, this came before the court a while back, or sometime last year.
You know, I'm not even a lawyer, I can read a consent decree. Would you like to read the consent decree? At least the provisions pertaining to following law.
Yes, okay, so the consent decree, which was filed February 11th, 2004, so we're almost, 13 years into it, specifically says in paragraph 47, page 23, this consent decree in no way affects the government of Guam's responsibilities to comply with all applicable federal and territorial laws and regulations. So it's made very clear that the government of Guam must comply with all federal and territorial laws. And what has happened is that that's been like, well, never mind what this says.
Yeah.
It's more important that we purchase these trucks.
So what is the plan though, Senator? How do you compel
Well,
GSWA to
the budget,
pay?
the budget has just been passed. We're not even looking at the money that's owed in the past. Moving forward, we just passed a budget. I'm hoping that the judge will see and be enlightened on past rulings, and moving forward, follow the law, follow consent decrees. And with that, with a budgeted item, allow that money to be utilized for improvements to the hospital, for our roofing systems and for our electrical systems, because this is a life and death matter. If she again authorizes or orders the receiver not to reimburse us, then we may have to look at other means. And again, whether it's administrative or legal. And that's where I'm looking towards our team here, that we may have to then look towards the Attorney General to see what needs to be done to move forward.
And the concern that the governor brings up is actually, there's a note, a statement in the most recent decision, where, Sandra, can you read that again, where the judge talks about
Financial impacts?
Financial detriment to Guam?
Yes, in the latest decision issued by the court, the latest order filed on January 27, 2017, the court states that it and the receiver have worked diligently with the government of Guam to ensure that the compliance with the consent decree will not cripple the government of Guam financially. And
I don't know which government of Guam entity our judge has been talking to, but I think we've been very clear since I've been governor of Guam, what the impacts of these rulings have been in terms of the damage being done to the government of Guam and the damage in terms of financial, what it means to the reductions and deterioration of critical services that need to be funded.
And then there's also that one area where, when the governor brought it up, where the court is sort of authorizing the receiver to break the law in order for these trucks, these specific
Can you read her
types of
opinion
trucks.
there?
Yes,
And I remind you folks, we're not lawyers. I'm going to work with the Attorney General on this. And hopefully the judge will see reason in some of the comments she's made. But then, we very clear what the consent decree said. Now,
yes,
why
so
don't you
so
read her
what,
ruling?
thank you, Governor, just kind of a follow-up to the proposition that the consent decree was intended to not cripple the government of Guam financially, was also a statement by the court that the current financing plan approved, which is the one where they authorized the holdback of the debt service reimbursement, allegedly does not detrimentally affect the government of Guam's ability to meet its financial obligations. And that although the court intended for the receiver to follow the law, it intended for it to follow the law, recognize, this is the quote, the court recognized that conformity with local law may not always be possible. And for the reasons discussed above, all having to do with emergency and
I don't
such.
remember the may ever being put in a consent decree.
This is one of those instances, and
And very clear as a senator before, there's a lot of difference between may and shall. And again, I didn't realize that you can pick and choose with complying with the laws of the land. It's kind of like what I'm hearing now is the ends justify the means. And as far as I'm concerned, I never knew that's how a court of law operates.
So Governor, are you seeking, will you ask the AG to petition the court to change your mind on the
Of
repayment
course.
plan?
I think what we're doing moving forward is we have a budget plan that's been submitted to the legislature. That budget plan encompasses $11.6 million that will come from this Section 30 money. That will focus on ensuring that water does not come down the walls of our hospital and that an electrical system doesn't short and electrocute someone. And we believe that those monies are rightfully ours. We believe that with what we are moving on, that the judge will be compelled to change her course of action as she's not done in the past, and move forward to what is in the best interest of the law, of the people of Guam, following a consent decree, following the law. Folks, you're the media. Again, there is no federal law that's been broken in our local procurement law. And now, as a matter of convenience, overstepping a decision made by a public auditor, overstepping a ruling made by a local judge's superior court, that, I believe, goes far, far above the bounds and the authority of any judge of the land, federal or local.
We have time for one more question.
So because this budget encompasses that, it assumes we get the reimbursements. Can you elaborate on what administrative remedies we could?
No, we have to look at offsets.
Offsets where?
No, there's other areas that we hold money. And I'm going to work with our team and work with the Attorney General. Unfortunately, this receiver doesn't seem to be able to have the infrastructure in place to do his own accounting and his own administrative work. So with that, we've also been tasked with the responsibility of holding monies for them. And with that, we may have to look at certain offsets. That being said, we may also have to look at, if necessary, having to go through legal means. I'm hoping the judge will work with us on this. Yeah, please.
For clarification's sake, this is a supplemental indenture. This document actually is the guiding principle, the legal contract for the establishment of the bond repayments. There's a section here that basically allows for the allocation of system revenues. System revenues being the rates and charges that GPA at the airport, GWA set to be able to operate their business enterprise. So basically it says that the department shall transfer its system revenues, and again, the government bond takes care of all the accounting for this enterprise, the system revenues, and then we have what I like to call the waterfall, right? So the first item, and it makes all the sense in the world, you have to have an ongoing business enterprise. So you have to pay for your system operation and maintenance. You have to pay your employees. You have to pay for the gas for the trash trucks. You have to do all that stuff for the collection and then all the billing of services. And you need to be incorporating all the costs that are associated with the rates and charges. And the second item basically says that they have to start paying after the operational cost is the system bond reimbursement fund. Now, this was being adhered to the first 2 years after we began this, and then there was an intercession, and we've been fighting that intercession. You know, in past budgets, the legislature had agreed that it was appropriate to be able to allocate the reimbursement funds to governmental operations. And so those provisions were in past budgets. It was only in this last budget because of the lack of movement that in the 17 budget, where that wasn't included, and the legislature didn't appropriate monies for that. But you also remember that was a budget that was handed over to us in a manner inconsistent with what we thought would be appropriate. So the requirements for the setting of rates and charges and the operation of the system and the reimbursement to the government of Guam for the debt service that is paid up front from Section 30 upon its receipt. We get it paid incrementally throughout the course of the fiscal year. And we, as the governor had mentioned, and as you guys saw, we have critical services that we need to fund. And in the last interview that we had, there was, I think Sean asked a question about the increase in medical dental line. The budget that's submitted by the governor, of course, is done January 31st. We don't know what those rates and charges are until after negotiations, like in the late summer. So, you put a placeholder, and then you understand what it is, and you fully fund it. Well, that wasn't the case. It hasn't been the case, and the governor directed us to look at historical payment and premium information and include that number. So,
is there a separate fund that GSWA through the receiver has set aside that money? Because they're wanting to save it now for future whatever they need to do to close.
But we've tried
Is
to
there
work.
actual money?
Really, we've tried to work with them.
How much?
Remember, we tried to work with them even with the financing plan, because what they've been wanting to do is upfront cash, just put it there in store. And remember when we presented the plan for financing these non-consent decree items, and also reimbursing us for money that was taken from us, we believe, contrary to the contract, the judge made a statement that was
She said it was
a plan that is
irresponsible.
irresponsible, and it was speculative.
Yeah.
If I was reminded, we took that portion out of our refinancing bond, and we got probably the best rates in our history at 3.6.
we got
It was-
the greatest interest rate on a bond
And
we've ever floated.
unfortunately, as a result of missing that, things have changed in the environment in terms of borrowing, because of what's happening around the world. So again, a judge made a determination, even with us trying to help them on things that we really, these were issues that were out of bounds, these non-consent decree items, these over expenditures, outside the consent decree, but we still try to work a financing plan. And the judge basically washed their hands of the plan, saying it was speculative, saying it was, again, not the best way to do. And here it was, we took that out, and we got the best interest rates ever. You know, I mean, no use no use crying about spilled milk, but I think as we lay out our case, it's important to bring back some of these historical facts. And again, you folks, as the media, should look at consent decrees, should look at bond indentures, should look at the laws. It's interesting when the judge made her ruling, usually in a ruling, you dictate when decisions are made on case law statutes. Boy, I tell you, when you look at the area about not following local law, and looking towards history there, I don't see anything. So it's be interesting to see her explanation on what case allowed for the past, the breaking of local laws. Again, I go back to, there was no federal law that contradicted this local procurement law. So this is just, as far as I'm concerned, the most recent egregious act of the federal courts in this regards. And at the same time, I'm going to ensure that this budget I presented to the legislature, that we're going to use these monies that are so important for our hospital, and I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that our pockets aren't picked again, so that we can use this money for our hospital.
Will the hospital get 11-point-something million regardless of how this turns out?
Well, the funding source is Section 30 money, the general fund.
Actually, the funding source is the reimbursement.
The reimbursement,
It's
the reimbursement.
accumulated, and I believe.
But does it come from the Section 30 or general fund? It's general fund.
It's general fund.
General fund.
So, do you have an idea of the amount accumulated?
For, out of the general fund?
Yeah, that's been stockpiled, but the
But
letter.
It's I think it's a little bit over 4 million,
I think it's closer, might be closer to 9, because he's been doing it for a couple of years.
we can look.
We can get back.
We can look,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll look for that information, but just
But
keep in
remember,
mind.
if we do have 9 million that's accumulated, that is still now holding in an account, every year, that adds up again.
Right,
The only, I mean, there should have been 40 to 40 some million, but again, when it's been held by the court and by the receiver, that money's been, a lot of that has been spent on areas that the court felt and the receiver felt that was a priority. Unfortunately, it's picking the pockets of our general fund and taking money that should have gone to Medicaid, should have gone to our hospitals, and should have gone to other critical services, maybe like the funding of education.
just in the last 2 years, you're talking about 25 million. And, one of the things and why it kind of caused the deficit is those Section 30 monies were spoken for. The legislature appropriates them for a specific purpose. So there's no additional monies floating around for use by not even us, to just, determine, okay, we're just going to decide to move it over here. So that's what happened. If we're expecting this reimbursement and that fund had already been appropriated by the legislature to go to a different program or to a different expenditure, that's what causes the deficit, because we're not getting the reimbursement and we have used that funds according to the legislature's plan. So I almost wonder if it's a violation of the separation doctrine, which the judge has now started to appropriate Section 30 monies at her will.
Actually, separations of more than one government entity.
Well, definitely over our management of funds.
You're focusing on making new law without any democratic process, through a legislature, or spending money without the executive authority, which is the governor. So again, this is something critical, and we are going to be very aggressive in it, and we believe now is the time to be that aggressive. It's critical. We need to fund this hospital, and we intend to do so.
Awesome. On that note, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
That concludes today's press conference.
So what is the